All right, Adam White here with another Front Office Sports webinar. Appreciate everyone joining us today. Obviously, the first week back for most people on a holiday. Super excited about today's topic, college football and social data-driven strategies for producing and deploying high-quality content, presented by our friends over at Influencer. And today we're joined by both Jim from Influencer and Leah from Mississippi State. I'm going to let them get into their background, why they're here, why they're talking about things. While you guys are listening to that, feel free to jump into the chat. You should see it. You should be able to interact with us, drop your name, where you're from, so everyone can get to know each other. Looking forward to the conversation over the next hour. If you do have any questions or you do have any things that you would like to ask Leah or Jim, feel free to drop them into the chat or into the questions, and we'll be hopefully happy to integrate them into the conversation. But yeah, looking forward to it, and thanks all for joining us. And Jim, I'll toss it over to you first.
Well, my name is Jim Cavell. I'm the founder and CEO of Influencer. Really humbled to be a part of this, this social media sports community that's continued to grow. There's so many jobs that didn't exist 5 years ago that exist now, and I think that will only increase as time goes on. And so, our purpose as a company, Influencer's purpose, is to serve storytellers. And that obviously is a word, storyteller, that can be used interchangeably with a lot of different folks. It could be folks like yourself watching who work every day tirelessly to create content and distribute content through social media and other digital channels. It could also be athletes, who really is the end user we've embraced most at Influencer, who has the following and desires to have more access to content to tell their story. But ultimately, that's a big reason our company exists. And, in 2 years, we've grown from, one client in Kentucky athletics to more than 100 in the college space alone, more than 500 teams, more than 15,000 athletes now use the Influencer app on their phone more than 4 times a week to grab content and share it on social to an audience bigger than 30 million. And to have that growth story in 2 years, including the growth story of building a team here at our Birmingham headquarters of folks like yourself watching, people that are professionals in sports, in social, working on this team here at Influencer, almost 30 people on our team. That growth story is, really because of the timing of what we're all in right now. We've done some things right, but you have to have luck in business. And the timing is right now is the biggest, most potent growth time for social media and storytelling for athletes. And in college sports, that's only going to compound with what's coming ahead of us with name, image, and likeness and some of the other things ahead. So we're proud to be a part of that movement, but we're also humble to know we do not have all the answers. And we're going to rely a lot on our partners, meaning the athletic departments we work with, the 500 plus teams, the athletes we work with, to try to continue to build the best solutions to be able to serve you and save you time, so that you can bring more value to the fans and recruits that your content's created for.
Awesome. Appreciate it, brother. And we should talk about some of the stuff you guys are preparing for NIL at some point too throughout this conversation, and Leah as well. But Leah, would love to have you just kind of run through your background as well and kind of just how you see the landscape.
So Leah Beasley, I'm our Executive Senior Associate Athletic Director over External Affairs. So lots of words in that title, but basically I oversee the 5 pods of our external team at Mississippi State University, a member of the Southeastern Conference. And those pods are kind of comprised of our marketing crew. So marketing, advertising, promotions, logos, branding, all of that, fan experience and game. We also have our broadcast operations crew. So those are our affiliates who deal with the video board operations, and our SEC network, ESPN, CBS affiliates. They deal with the TV side and the network side of things, pushing out all of our events and our games. We have our creative team. So we recently restructured over the last summer. It was a decision that we made to be more streamlined. And as Jim was saying, the content and storytelling are at an all-time high right now, and that's due to social media and technology in the digital space. And so we decided at Mississippi State, we don't have time to be inefficient. And so one thing that was a big charge on my plate was to streamline a lot of our motives. So we took photography, videography, graphic design, and social media, and email marketing. We placed them all in one pod called our creative team. So they handle our digital space and social media as well. They also get help from our comm team. So that's our third pod, is our communications, public relations, media relations team. And while they may be hitting send and doing in-game for all of their sports, those SIDs, as you guys know, kind of handle social media for those sports, they work really closely with our creative team on an overall strategy and how to tell our story, how to get that content out in the best way, best platform, best timing, best messaging, with a consistent tone. And that's kind of driven by our creative team. So we have probably about 30 to 35 members on our external staff, and they kill it every day. A new group we just added to our team is our digital and outbound ticket sales team. We also couple that with our fan experience group, and they are a group of students and GAs led by a full-timer, and they are working very closely with our ticket office and as well as our creative team and the rest of our team to kind of, again, use our home base of fan experience to then drive revenue. So obviously revenue is important to all of us. And one thing that Jim and Adam and I were talking about is, I'll just kind of dive into the why, Adam, if you're good with that.
Yeah.
Is before we kind of dive into some of these strategies that you guys are here for, just to kind of talk about why we're even having this discussion. And hopefully you all agree with this statement, but it should be driven by the student athlete and the fan experience. Now, I see some of you are with different groups. You're not all with universities, and you're not all in collegiate athletics specifically at a university or a college, but everybody in any business realm can understand your repeat customers. You have to have repeat customers, and those repeat customers are constantly engaging and constantly yearning for, asking for content. And so that is our job. If you forget everything else today, our job is to tell our story and to produce content that our fans want to eat, sleep, and breathe. That's our job. And our home base at that core, at all of our decision making, it should be for you guys, for me, it is for our crew. If any of our crew is on here right now, I know they're probably rolling their eyes at me because they hear this all the time, but it's the student athlete and the fan experience should be at the core of your decision making. And that, of course, is then helped and aided by content and storytelling. If you're not telling those stories, then your fans aren't getting the nuggets that they want to help them continue to drive. If they're not continuing to drive and come back, then you're not making any money, and therefore you're not sustaining your business. And our business is ultimately getting folks at our events. But before that, it's making sure that they enjoy our events, and that by doing that, they're enjoying and eating up the content that we're producing.
Yeah, I mean, that's that cycle that you're talking about, Leah, is really something that everyone needs to think about, whether you're in pro or college sports, because the cycle you're talking about really comes down to free storytelling. You know, if you look at a funnel, since everybody still is trying to generate revenue at the end of the day, right? Obviously, the people at the bottom of the funnel are the ones buying tickets, buying merchandise, providing all the revenue that's funding these operations at the college or pro level. But you can't just have a bottom of funnel strategy. You have to have a top of funnel strategy. And the top of funnel strategy is branding. It's the stuff that you can't purely link to ROI, but it's where ROI begins. And without it, your ROI won't be the same. And so everybody's got a boss in here. If you're on the content or social media staff of a university or an agency or whatever, you've got a boss who is asking for reports to show them ROI, right? But what you've got to be able to do is communicate how the top of the funnel stuff you're doing with social is translating into the bottom of funnel results. And so what I look at is, since I'm so focused and we are so focused at Influencer on the individual storytelling efforts of athletes in a collective manner for teams, who follows athletes? And the reality is, a fourth of their followers, more than 25%, are recruits. We just did a study, top 100 college basketball recruits, and more than 90% of them followed players on the teams recruiting them before they ever had followed the team account of the team recruiting them. So they're trying to get a look at the program recruiting them from the eyes of the players currently playing on that program. More than 50% of athletes' followers are fans, the same people you're trying to reach through other efforts, TV, traditional media, down to non-traditional things like social, are following your athletes. And keep in mind, your athletes together as a whole have a unique collective following that outnumbers their team account by an average of 3.5 times. So there's 3.5 times more people, fans and recruits, making up 3/4 of that number that you can reach through athletes. And so as we know, social's hard because it's not just one post that changes everything. It's a grind. And athletes want content, and they want as much of it as they can get, as often as they can get it, in as real time as possible. Let me break those down. They want as much as they can get. So that means everything you're shooting already, investing payroll into to produce, they want access to it. They're also wondering, they tell me this, when they're on the field or the court, who's that photographer there? Who are they with? What media outlet are they with? I wonder if they got this picture of this play I made or this pregame thing I was doing in the end zone with my friends, right? So they want as much from you, from the media outlets that cover you, as they can get. The second thing is they want it in real time. They don't want content that's available 3 days later. As you know, with social, it's a now society. So when you look at Brady Breeze's post, which outperformed Oregon's team account greatly after he won the defensive MVP at the Rose Bowl, and you look at the impact of him doing that seconds after he walked off the stage with the trophy, while everybody really cares about the Rose Bowl. Keep in mind, this time next year, many people won't be able to name who played in that game because there's so many bowl games. But that's a big time post that he needs access to right away. And he needs access to that content right away. And so I think that's really important to mention. And then going into what Leah talked about, like you look at just Mississippi State football. Mississippi State football had 3,694 shares on social, on multiple platforms during camp through the end of the season. 3,694 shares. 133 different individuals were the ones sharing 3,600 plus times, almost 3,700 times. They reached an active, unique weekly audience on Instagram alone through their athletes of 114,000 additional people. So outside of their team account, they were reaching another 6-figure audience through their athletes. Their athletes.
And here real quick on that number is the one that we're using. So a ton. I mean, obviously, the numbers that Jim is mentioning, his team they're constantly giving us reports and feedback, and then I'm able to take that back to to our CFO and say our investment is paying off, and we're able to, through influencer, to be able to reach 6 figures in addition to what we're doing on our own accounts. But as Jim mentioned, the amount of followers that our student athletes have, your student athletes have, not only the number is there, so you're getting the quantity, but you're also getting a diverse base of demographics. So, different people follow Facebook, different people follow Instagram. We all know where those demographics lie. We know how we need to kind of speak on Facebook, speak on Instagram, and speak on Twitter. We understand that, but to understand that our fans, no matter what age group, demographic, they're following our student athletes. They're a little bit more forgiving of our student athletes and what they're posting and what they're saying than they would be perhaps if they're judging what we are saying. So we're using that forgiveness, and we're using those that wide depth of diversity by those who follow our student athletes in order for us to grow our image and grow our brand as well, as Jim was saying. So that almost 114, 15,000 is huge for us in that ROI that we're talking about.
And Leah, talk about the engagement rate factor, right? Because we all know that, it's widely publicized that an athlete post of the same exact picture is going to get 10 times as much engagement as the team account's going to get.
Absolutely. And it's because it's coming from them. Again, it hits heavier they're hitting the recruits, as Jim was mentioning, and they're hitting our fan base too, who are buying season tickets. So for us, we're constantly thinking about it being twofold. You marketers out there who are working for universities, you understand when you're sitting down with your coaches, it didn't necessarily used to be so much of a focus on the recruiting side. And now our coaches are constantly asking for help in recruiting. And we may not be growing in staff. So therefore, what do we have to do? We have to utilize technology. We have to be innovative and creative. We're not adding a ton of staff for the marketing departments to then go and tell the football coaching staff, here's what we're doing to help you in recruiting. So we're investing in technology that does that for us. We have a team that is doing that for us that may not necessarily be on our payroll. So that's incredibly efficient. And at Mississippi State, and probably like many of you, I'm seeing a lot of the universities listed, you can't afford inefficiency. We might be in the SEC. And we love it. The SEC, the greatest conference there is. Sorry, I had to do that plug. But we also, we're not the LSU, we're not the Alabamas, we're not the Floridas. Excuse me, if you guys are on here, good for you. Our budget is not that. Our staff is not that. We are not made up like that. So what we have to do is be more efficient every single day. We have to ask, are those decisions that we're making going to help in recruiting and then going to touch our bottom line, which for us, our bottom line, our home base, and necessarily revenue generation, that comes from this. But again, it's a student athlete and fan experience. So this tool, Influencer, is helping us touch that. In every single one of our meetings, I meet with all of our coaches and all of our student athletes, every single team of our 16 teams that we have. And we talk about recruiting. We talk about what we can do. We talk about photos, videos, what they can do on social media. And right now we started off with Jim and his team with our 4 revenue sports. So football, men's basketball, women's basketball, and baseball. And we had an influencer training. We used a lot of what Influencer gave us as background, but then we also took each student athlete through that. So they had their phones. We had our staff there. We're telling them what we were able to do with them. As soon as you tell them that they have their own brand and they are able to capitalize on that using the incredible content that we're able to give them, their eyes light up. So they're like, how can I get that? Because it's the days of texting us and saying, hey, please send me those photos. That's thankfully over for us now because we have Influencer. It's just, again, a lot more efficient so that our staff can focus on other things and promoting our program and not constantly texting student athletes individual pictures. So you're serving your recruits, you're serving your fan base, and you're serving your brand.
I think also on the efficiency note, everyone who's on here, you're investing a lot of your school or your agency or team is investing dollars into content creation. And I want you to start thinking about from all levels of content, from the most beautifully edited video that you spend 2 days on shooting and 3 days on editing, to the picture that was snapped 4 different angles from a play and in between. How can you have efficiency with your content? And one thing that I love about Mississippi State's story, and I see this a lot, something I track with all the reports from all of our teams and clients, is content efficiency. And so Mississippi State uploaded just under 10,000 pictures and videos to Influencer, and about half of those were shared on social. And so think about it. Think about a tweet, right? A great tweet that's retweeted by 100 different people. They're all retweeting, obviously, the same creative because it's a retweet. Now think about 100 different people posting 100 different things with 100 different messages from their perspective. I look at it like the old TV affiliate model. You know, you have NBC, and then NBC has all their market channels, NBC Atlanta, NBC Boston, NBC Detroit. Same thing here. Your school has affiliate channels in the athletes who want to be those channels. They want to build their own brand. And if you give them a lot of content in a frequent manner and it's in real time, they're going to use it. And they're going to use it more if they're able to use it how they want. Share it what platform they want to share it on. Say what they want to say, rather than having you package up what you think they like and what you think they want to say and where you think they want to share it.
Right. And in that too, what we've been able to do to take that a step further is, yes, they get to have their own brand and their own messaging, but we still do on our end. We still, go off of the training that we do with every single team before the season starts and just let them know what they could say, could affect them. We still give them verbiage if they want to use it. Some of them do, some of them don't. A lot of times they're like, well, what should I say here? So we help them in those ways too, just to kind of continually train them. And that's part of that student athlete experience. We're trying to help them to know what to say, what might get the most engagement on their end, so that it, again, carries them beyond their graduation from Mississippi State.
What's some of the content that they're craving? You both have talked about the content and the recruits and things like that. What are some of these? What is it? Is it pictures? Is it images? Like, how are you guys optimizing? Are you optimizing with an extra photographer because everyone wants photos, or they want more video? How does that kind of shake out for you guys, Leah, and then even Jim?
Yeah,
kind of
so
overall?
it's video and photos, and it's constant. They will find, now they know our photographers, they know our videographers, and sometimes Jim was saying, oh, who's that person? They will go up to people and they're like, oh, I don't work for Mississippi State, but because they're looking for that. We've also had to be aware, and our coaches had to be aware too of, hey, like, you still have a game to play. So just kind of be aware of when that is happening. So we, on our team, that's something that we didn't really expect, for them to be seeking out those creators. And so we do have to kind of got to pull back a little bit just so they're focused on their game. But we're always promising them, and there's never been a time where we failed to give them content. So they have trusted that we're doing that. They're trusting that we're finding them and that we're going to upload that, give them that content very easily and quickly. So we'll see them posting it. Literally, they get in the locker room, they do their post-game speech, and then they're literally on their phones looking for what we've been able to give them. But I'll tell you, it's not just game stuff. Like, they love the game stuff for sure. But for instance, from the bowl game, we had a lot of our guys, we went to the water park. We went to we went to dances, we went to different things that, bowl activities. And a lot of the guys were like, I want to see me in the water park. Did you post that yet? And so that's pretty cool too, to see that they, as Jim was saying, they want to see what they're dancing in the end zone with their friends. They want to see more of that fun content too. And that, again, shows their personality off of the court, off of the field. And one thing too, is we all know you can have a rough season. We've been through that. We just got through with a little bit of that here. And so if we can tie our fans into, and our student athletes, if we can tie that into a love for a player, you're in love with what you see. Kylan Hill, who is, by the way, our most engaged, he uses the platform the most, and the fans eat it up. But our fans are loving what he's doing. They're loving the dances. They're loving the smiles. They're loving all the stuff that he's doing off the field, because he's a funny guy and he's a very entertaining guy. And if they are falling in love with him there, then maybe it won't matter as much as if he, doesn't gain a lot of yards. So it's not tied necessarily to the wins and the losses as much as it is to the relationship with the student athlete. And that's what we're trying to do too, because we cannot control, Jim can't control, Adam, you can't control wins and losses. As much as we want to, we can't. But what we can control is the content and the messaging. And that then helps our fan base stay connected, stay engaged, even if we're losing. And then it helps us sell tickets, because those folks are invested in the student athlete. You're seeing the personalities of these kids.
Yeah, I love Kylan's story. I mean, almost 600 app sessions where he engaged with content on Influencer on his app. In less than a year. I mean, more than 2 a day. He's on there all the time. I think that we need to realize too that all of us in these roles, no matter how young you are, we're not as native to technology and social as the student athletes are at our university, or as the athletes are if you're at a pro team agency, and especially with your recruits. I've had many visits this year where I'm seeing a football game of a client, and they say, hey, we've got a recruit on campus. Could you talk to him and his parents? Because the recruit wants to talk about social. They want to know, what's your content team look like? If they don't say they want to know, they still want to know. So you need to know that yourself and make sure that the process is there. Now, the disconnect between coaches and everything we're talking about today and athletic directors and everything we're talking about today can be limiting. One of the beauties of our Mississippi State partnership is like, that meeting took place with Leah and John Cohen, the AD, because John gets it. And the coaches there really get it. And that helps Leah be able to be empowered to lead her team to do what you're hearing her team's been able to do. I know many work at schools that might be different than that, or might work with athletes that are different than what we're talking about. I think education's big. And so being able to show the numbers like the ones we just talked about, 10x engagement on an athlete post versus our team's post. Athletes had access to 10,000 pictures and videos and shared almost half of those throughout the season, reaching an average audience on Instagram alone of 6 figures per week, right? Like those kinds of things will get folks listening. 26% of the followers of the average student athlete on our teams is a recruit. Like use those to try to educate the coaches and other staff members and even your AD on these things, because it is the future, and it is what recruits want to be sold.
I think, Jim, maybe if and Adam, I'm kind of calling audible here, but if those numbers, because obviously I have our numbers beside me, but if those numbers that you're talking about to kind of help our folks on this call, talk to their influencers, talk to their CFOs, talk to their ADs about this type of investment, maybe we could send that out, Adam, to that email, just to kind of say, hey, like as you're saying, how percentage of recruits, how much engagement you can get, the number of followers these kids have versus our own accounts, our own verified accounts. So that's absolutely huge.
I agree.
And speaking of engagement, John actually asked, he's like, define it when you say it's 3-4x is eyeballs, impressions, unique users, replies, forwards of content, comments, etc. What levels of engagement are you guys tracking? So since we're on the subject, we might as well talk about that, and it could be probably unique for both cases.
Yeah, I think for the 10x average engagement of an athlete post versus a team post. So on our platform this year, we averaged across all 15,000 athletes in 2019. Their post had 21% engagement versus a little over 2% engagement for the average team post of their team. That engagement puts everything in one bucket. So comments, shares to stories, likes, all the different things that fit within the definition of engagement. It's not actually a breakdown that I would provide right now, but I do think that one of the engagement things I think is very interesting, and you're seeing our athletes do it a ton, is resharing stories. So one thing that we really push our athlete users on is when you're using content in a story, to involve other people on your team or from other teams in that content. Call out your buddy that you played high school ball with who's playing for another school for having a great game and tag him. Call out your teammate who had a great game or who's in the shot with you and tag her, right? And by doing that, you're seeing, and I think we've seen it all this year anyways on Instagram, people resharing stories, which is exposing each other to different demographics and audiences that each other has from where they came from. And that's really what social is all about. And anybody who's become an influencer on social has only just borrowed audiences from other people, other, industries, genres, et cetera, right? And so I think out of all the engagement things, while comments and likes are a great mechanism and views of videos are a great way to gauge the success of a piece of content, I think also seeing how many shares of that post happened, if it's Instagram or if it's Twitter, retweets, I think is a great one because it shows how many new audiences it was exposed to outside of the core audience you have.
Yeah. It's in addition to that too, it's longevity. I mean, we all know that social media is very fleeting. Sometimes we want it to be, that's okay. But sometimes we want our video that took our videographers hours and days and prep work to create. We want that to have a longer shelf life. And by using our student athletes to do so, and then retweeting with comments, sharing, all of those things, it's making it last longer. It's making it shelf life longer for something that's took our team so long to create. Jim mentioned engagements, but on top of that too, just account growth. I mean, you're talking about our overall account growth for instance, Kylan alone was over 30% in a season. That's talking in a season. So that's huge. Obviously he had success, but a lot of that is from what he's putting out there. Our fans are able to see behind the scenes information because of what we're able to give them. And that's causing his account to grow. If he can then come back and we can say, look how much Kylan's account grew, then his buddy also wants that too. They want that branding. They want to go to the next level. All of our student athletes want to go pro, and they understand that this is going to help them do that too by getting their name and a lot of their content out there. But we've seen not only our student athletes accounts growing, but also our sport accounts are growing too by an average of 15%. So that's something that's huge for us too. You always want growth, you always want followers, and a lot of that can be attributed back to this content that we're giving our student athletes alone.
Yeah, it's really a rising tides lifts all boats situation. And when we looked at just we took a sample of 10 of our teams who use the platform, and then we took 10 teams who do not. And the athletes on teams that had a platform and an app in place where they could get content in real time posted 85% more. And so, yeah, you do have to win on the field. That helps, but it's not the end all be all, to Leah's point earlier. But being ready for the moment, whether you're Kylan Hill and you led the SEC in rushing and are declaring for the NFL draft, but your team didn't do as well as you wanted to, or be ready for the moment if you're, a student athlete at a school that's had a magical run in March Madness, having that content available is going to make it get out there more, because they're just 85% more likely to post it. And then selling that in the recruiting process, especially as you look at pro athlete stories. I think this is really important. I see some agency folks on here. The athlete is evolving with social. We talked about that earlier. A lot of athletes that you've signed as an agency in the past 5 years they're like, here's my social, take it, right? And now you're seeing athletes say, obviously if it's this or this post, you can help, but I want my social still. And I was at NBA Summer League with 10 of our athletes who had just left our client schools, and guys like RJ Barrett from Duke talking about this. And what's great is if you can find ways to continue to provide those athletes with content from their pro career after they've left your university, because it's going to keep them engaged with you. And when you want their help promoting a campaign or recruiting venture, anything you're doing, they're more likely to help because you're depositing into them even after they've left. And that's really why we did the USA Today deal we did. It's why we're negotiating other deals like it, Atlantic Records Music, things that our college clients can use to provide more content more often to not just their student athletes, but even their alums. Because with USA Today content, you get coverage of every NFL and NBA game. And so now your alums, Kylan Hill included, will continue to get his content from his NFL highlights and NFL stuff through Mississippi State. So they're getting that's enormous because the athlete doesn't want to just hand over their social anymore. The younger the athlete, the more likely they want to hold on to it and do a lot of it themselves. And I think we all need to realize that no matter where we work, colleges or pro sports team or agency, because that is only going to increase because we've got a whole slew of natives coming up. I mean, I have a 17-year-old daughter and I have an 8-year-old daughter, and they are completely different, 9 years apart, because my 8-year-old daughter knows nothing but technology. My 17-year-old remembers a little bit before, and the difference is staggering.
And the piece and all that too, you talk about, I'm sure that you talk to your student athletes and you're telling them, that they're always in the family. And that's something that there's not lip service for us. You guys probably seen it. We have family campaigns. Once a bulldog, always a bulldog. And that's something that we've been able to continue with a lot of our key influencers. And as Jim said, you have to continuously speak to them. But what are you doing besides, shoot them a text, whatever, saying congratulations, we do billboards, whatever, but we're still investing in them after they're gone through this platform. So that's something that's huge for us too. And it makes it a little bit easier when you're asking them to come back for an event or to help donate to, your indoor football project. Like, it makes it a lot easier whenever they know that what you say you mean and that you're continually investing in them. Second piece of that, which Jim talked about a little earlier, is education. They have to understand what's there, and they have to understand how they can use it too. So that piece, I don't think we can hit home enough on that. Is just letting them know that bank, that inventory is there for them to use, but then also for our coaches to use on the road whenever they are recruiting. I'll give one example of that too, that it was huge. We had a mom and a student athlete of one of our women's basketball players, and we sit in on all of these. I speak to our student athletes and recruits when they come in, and it's fun. That's a piece of our job that we love. But you don't really know how much of an impact you're having. And one of these heavy hitters literally signed with us because of the content that we hit on. And we showed her videos and we showed her where it lives. We pulled up the influencer app. We showed her own, like what could be her own page. And she loved it. She ate it up. The mom actually found me later and was like, you have no idea what that just did for her. And she'll be one that will most likely go in the WNBA. And so we have some scouts that come in and we kind of tell them what we're doing here. And it's huge whenever you're able to put your money where your mouth is. So that's fun for us to be able to say that that's a huge ROI bump, is that somebody's saying they signed because of the content that we're actually giving them.
Yeah, I think, picturing from a post-college experience standpoint, going pro, picturing Kylan Hill getting hit daily with content through influencer because of Mississippi State, and then something mixed in where there's a Bulldog campaign that you've built an influencer for him to share is a lot different than him just getting that campaign. And on the other side, for the recruit at the beginning of the life cycle, to see that there's a way to get content, tell your story, and see variety of content. We did a survey with our athlete community, and there's so much we're learning, because once again, no matter who you are on this webinar, we're all older and come from a different generation than the student athletes coming up. And we said, what's your favorite type of content? And the ranking was, action picks, no surprise, was first. But right behind it was group picks. Group picks is big because a lot of coaches are worried about social being an I thing or a me thing, but it's not. When you really look at it, it can be a we thing, and it can change perspectives. I'm going to go off on a rant here. Zion comes into Duke, one of our clients. And I remember hearing, hey, this guy's huge on social, but his rep is, first of all, he's projected to be 7th in the NBA draft next year. He's a big dunker. He's got to really work on other parts of his game. His whole social is all built around him as a dunker. And it could not be more different from the truth. The truth was he was a complete basketball player, freakishly played bigger than he already was going to be the number 1 pick in the draft, as we all saw. And on social is actually way more of a we guy than a me guy. And look no further than how much he celebrates his teammates in his Instagram stories and even his posts. And he changed the perception, even with NBA front office execs, with how he told his story on social, mainly Instagram, throughout the year. And so to show athletes that you're going to get action picks, but you're going to get group picks, and to show coaches that too. You're going to get a variety of picks outside of action shots, running out of the tunnel, solo picks, pregame picks, travel picks, celebration picks, right? And shockingly, videos was 8th out of the 10 things. So while video happens through our platform, and it's used in about 11% of the shares that happen, we're in Instagram culture right now. That's just where we are. And so people want pictures, and they want a variety of them, and they want them in real time, which is a big reason we've negotiated rights deals with photography outlets on top of allowing the schools or pro teams or whoever to create their own content and provide it. And so I think just thinking through that lens of the athlete and what they want is really important. I think also thinking through, going back to the before they arrive in college to the after they leave and go pro dichotomy. When they come in now, especially if they're going to a university where they do have pro aspirations, they want to know how they can build the value they're going to cash in on when they leave. Very important. And I was just at a basketball school that's one of our big clients, and they bring a lot of pro guys through, and they want to show athletes and continue to show athletes the value that has occurred during the year, 2, 3 years that you're at the university that you'll be able to cash in on when you leave. Bloomberg did a great article with a couple of our pro guys that are now in the NFL about how different their deals were when they went to the NFL draft because of that last season where they were posting more and built a bigger audience. And so relating the recruiting process on the front end to the back end portion for future pro athletes you're recruiting is big. For smaller schools, all these numbers are the same from a ratio standpoint. You're going to have a 3 to 4 times bigger audience through the collective followings of your athletes versus your team account. Just might be smaller quantity of numbers. and you're going to see 10x engagement from athletes versus your team. All that's the same, just smaller numbers. And instead of it being a story for recruits that's all about pro ball, it's about the life that they're about to start after they get done with college and how to build a social media following responsibly that they can leverage for whatever they do. They may come apply to work here. They may try to go work for front office sports or for Leah. Like, we all look at social when we get an applicant. So it doesn't really change. It's just different from a numbers standpoint, and recruits either way want to hear about it.
And just if we had a question jump in here, we have about 15 minutes. So I do want to touch on that because it's so important for the forward-thinking look of college athletics and what it looks like in 3, 5, even next year. But NIL, name, image, and likeness, Leah, how has that changed content strategy? What are you guys talking about internally that you can share in terms of just like what does this look like, right? We saw Oklahoma and UCF basically build brands for their signing day, recruits and things like that. So, how do you guys see it? And then Jim, what are your clients coming to you and talking to you about? What are people looking for with just all of the things that potentially could come from this whole name, image, and likeness?
On our end, for those of you who are in the university and college space, you got to remain close to your compliance department. That's something that is first and foremost. And that was one of the things when we were getting the relationship with Jim. And after we had several conversations, we were already in our compliance office was already very comfortable with what we were going to do. They had a lot of questions, and we told them what we were doing. We're serving our student athletes, but everything was with intent of what's happening with the NIL stuff. So, and our whole team, it's an education process too for our external team. They didn't really know they were going to be schooled up in all of this, but they had to be, because we have to know what our student athletes are going to ask us. If one of our SIDs is getting hounded by one of our student athletes, and they have to know the right strategies and right answers to not go overboard, but to say, you know what, we're understanding this is happening, and you deserve to have your pictures and your photos in your portal, and that's what we're giving them. So this is actually a tool that does help us with those issues that are coming on the pike. So I think that the compliance area of this is obviously it's still, the landscape is changing. We always know that, but my urge for our crew is to continue to read on it, and then also remain close to our compliance department and let them know all the things that we're doing in terms of NIL with our student athletes.
Yeah, I think what we're doing today, what we talked about today on this webinar, and what is happening in the present when it comes to empowering athletes with content, is the foundation of what lies ahead. It's my guy, Jimmy V. I watch his speech every time this year because it's Jimmy V week on ESPN. And one thing he says in that speech is you got to know where you came from to understand where you are now to realize where you want to go. And I think in everything we do, we need to think about those three things. Where we came from was a place where, I don't know if you could even ask that question last year and an administrator would be comfortable talking about it. Yeah. Leah, would you agree with that?
Totally.
Topic a year ago, right? Now the NCAA's come in today and said, we're going to work on it. And now everybody's trying to think about tomorrow. I'll keep with it. I mentioned earlier, many of your jobs didn't exist 5 years ago. They exist now. And in some cases, they're disconnected from the leaders of the program, head coaches and ADs, not in all, because there are proactive head coaches and ADs that are embracing this even more. But you control a voice that's actually reaching more people today than the TV networks are reaching, even though that's still what the powers that be are thinking about most, because that's where the money is coming from, right? That's funding programs. All of this is evolving and changing. And so the foundation of it is free storytelling, whether it's on your team account, whether it's on a pro athlete account you work with. If you are not posting, at least 9 out of every 10 posts are not just free, letting people in, telling the story. I'm just telling you, you're missing the boat because nobody likes social because of advertising. Nobody likes social because they want to be sold a product. People like social because it's authentic and it's allowing you into people's lives in a way that you could never really get into unless you watched a documentary film years ago, right? So that's what we need to preserve. And that comes with frequency of posts and authenticity and variety of posts. So athletes posting about their family, their friends, their fans, their dreams, not just all the stuff on the field. A lot different than a guy who just posts stuff on the field, just as much as an athlete who only posts ads. So we've got to think about how can we build this foundation of storytelling that's happening from all of our student athletes on a regular basis, so that when it's on the table to have a signage sponsor in the stadium come to us and say, hey, we love the idea of doing a collective campaign with 11, 13, 9, or even all of the athletes on this team, and making some content that's branded, that has a campaign they can share, that can be mixed into it. And I believe it's, once again, a we opportunity more than a me opportunity. Everybody right now, I think, is focusing on Zion being the level of athlete you have to be to really benefit from name, image, and likeness. But if I know anything about people who work with college sports, they're about all athletes. And I think that they're going to see that this can benefit all athletes, maybe just to a different extent monetarily, because they have different levels of followings based on what they've done on the field or off the field. And so realizing that these are channels that represent your university, and having a strategy to tell stories with and through these channels now, so that they have the engagement and there's a process set up to deliver content and track the engagement of that content for the future when brands want to get involved, is really what everyone should be embracing right now.
Whether you are in agreement or not with the impending NIL structure, I mean, it's we all can agree that our student athletes, and we too, being that those that create the content and put it out there, are benefiting from the photos and the videos that are being put out there. So, and whether an athlete goes pro or not, I mean, that their future employers can still see that quality content that we still are producing. So it's not the student athlete producing it, but it's us producing it. So we still have some level of control, but not too much control over that student athlete. So that student athlete has the freedom, but they're using the resources that we're still giving them to do so. So whether they're going to go pro or not, we're still giving them that freedom. We're still, I hate to say this word, but check a box when it comes to the legislature. So if you're being asked, what are you doing for your student athletes? What are you doing in regards to their own name, image, and likeness? This will satisfy a lot of that conversation.
I agree. And I'm blessed to be able to sit down with a lot of the athletic directors, commissioners, and folks that are really pushing the group thoughts forward on how it should be or how it will be. And one thing I think all of them have in common is they're not getting emotional about whether or not they agree with it. Right. They're coming to the realization of it's not a matter of if, but when. And they're investing in hires and other strategies to be ready for it. And the one that Leah talked about is the one that everyone and every leader should be embracing right now, which is empowering your athletes with the content you're already investing into payroll to produce. And some of it you're credentialing other people to produce. How can you equip your athletes with that, because they're asking for it already, so that you can help them tell their story? And then how can you measure what the impact of them telling their story is? If you're doing those two things now, access for your athletes to content and measurement of the impact of that content when they share it, that is the beginning. That is the foundation of the house you're going to build for NIL with your organization.
Awesome. Well, we have about 8 more minutes, and so I do want to jump into a few questions over here. Leah, I'm going to kick this one to you because I know you mentioned the size of your external staff, but Alina Rogers asked, how many staff members plus interns are on your creative /social/video team?
So we do have one social media coordinator who kind of oversees the main accounts and our messaging and tone. She actually has a whole document. We use her in all of our retreats that we have during the year, and she kind of schools up our different areas on data. A lot of it is data driven. Some of that which we get from Influencer, and a lot of it we do on the back end on our own. So she kind of runs that. She's in our creative team, but we also have our SIDs. So we have about 6 to 8 SIDs who per sport are also using social media for that specific sport. For instance, women's tennis, men's tennis, golf, women's basketball, men's basketball. Those SIDs are running that, but it's a constant communication with our social media coordinator, and her boss, which reports to me, is the department head over creative. So he has a heavy hand in that as well. So I guess you could really say one full-timer over social media strategy and messaging, and then a boss that supervises that, and then our SIDs who run those individual accounts, but then filter information back into that social media coordinator, who can kind of use that data from an overarching perspective of an athletic department standpoint. And we kind of adjust our messaging and strategies based on what those SIDs are giving us back and what she's seeing from the feedback that we get based on our social media strategy.
Yeah, if you don't mind, Adam, I see another question that actually ties into something I wanted to say about what I think Leah and Mississippi State do so well. Sarah Rudolph, who works with one of our clients, and she asked a really good question, which is, have you found it difficult to get buy-in from coaches? And from experience, we've had a few coaches that feel any extra social media related stuff for their student athletes is a distraction. I think it's important what Leah and Mississippi State has done, and it's because it's top down, right? It's her, it's John, it's the staff at the top, like saying, we need to pay attention to this, and that's what's driven their org chart, the hiring. There's also this, I don't know if it's the evolution of the SID or what it is, but the SID's job used to be, just 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, it was like, just get the release onto the website as soon as you can after the game. You know what I mean? Get the stats done. And that was a big part of nobody really goes to the website anymore, right? So the job has changed to tweeting, to social. It's created a different skill set, a different set of roles and responsibilities. And the SID traditionally has always been the right-hand woman of the head coach. They help them into the press conference. They help them with everything media related. And so making sure that if it's an SID or if it's another staff member, that there's somebody that's educating the coach on how much this plays into recruiting. The distractions thing that Sarah brought up is real. And should you check your Twitter mentions at halftime? No, you shouldn't do that. Social media can be a distraction. It's a blessing and a curse. It's a weapon of mass production or a weapon of mass destruction. Like anything great, it can be used the wrong way. But that just comes with coaches understanding how it plays into really the most important part of their program, which is recruiting, because that's what brings in the athletes, that helps them win games, and eventually, of course, sells tickets and brings on other ROIs. But it also plays into fan engagement and other things that Leah touched on that can even override wins and losses. And so, yeah, Sarah, sure, we see it. One of the two teams playing in the national championship Monday has a policy where their players can't go on social media at all during the season. You know what I mean? To each his or her own, but it's not going to change. If your athletes have content, they're more likely, 85%, to post. Your athletes are followed by recruits and fans more than any team account or brand account that represents your university. And you're already investing a lot of money and credentialing a lot of other folks to create a lot of content. And so if we can embrace that it moves that way, great. And if we can't, we've got to educate. And I think that SID coach relationship is where a lot of the education happens. Now, of course, there's some SIDs that you may know that have the same issue, Sarah, where the SID hasn't embraced social, and that's going to be an uphill battle. But I think that those folks will learn over time.
Well, I think in that term, that's what it is important to make sure that you're having someone else outside of that sport, outside of the, our SIDs get connected to our sports. We need them to be connected to our sports. So you need to have someone else who has a background in that. If you can. If you can't, then try to train them on that background. But that they are a little bit more unbiased, and they are seeing the big picture of things. So they are using every SID's feedback, and then they are taking data-driven decisions and giving it back to those SIDs of how they're posting, frequency, content, timing, the platform they're using. So they're kind of letting them know those things. And ours does a great job of that because she's pulled apart from a sport. She's not necessarily with one sport specifically. So, and a lot of people can do that. It can be a GA. We had a GA doing that because we couldn't fund a full-time position. So for some of the smaller institutions, that's a way to start. And believe me, they want it. They love having the reins to that social aspect. And then because we saw what a driving force it was, then we put more in dollars investment into that. We were able to use some monies from our outbound ticket sales team in order to help fund that position too.
Well, as we finish up, we got a couple more minutes, so I guess I want to let you guys leave with some passing wisdom. What's like 2 or 3 things that either you found really helpful or just some sort of takeaways that you think people that you can kind of pass on as like, hey, like this is what we did and this is what worked or whatever it is like that. So Leah, I'll kick it to you, and then Jim, I'll let you finish this up.
Yeah, create FOMO, like create that fear of missing out. That is something that we talk about all the time. And our student athletes are helping us do that because they're showing what's going on behind the scenes. And we're able to then kind of supplement that by talking about the atmosphere, the environment. That was a huge thing for us this last year. We were coming off of a year where we lost a quarterback, and we're coming into a year where we had, there were some different aspects that were happening specifically with football. That's what we're talking about. And so we knew we had to create that FOMO. We had to get people invested in the program, invested in the student athletes, and understand that our atmosphere and our environment at our games is second to none. And so, but we have to get you there. And to get you there, we need our student athletes to start talking about it and to start helping create that FOMO. So every video we did leading up to the season wasn't focused necessarily on a star player or star coach. It was collectively look at this group of student athletes that we have that are having fun all the time, and then look at the environment that we're going to create for you, the fan, if you invest back in us. So if you're not there, here's what you're going to miss. And that's what we were focused on with us. I think that was one of our biggest takeaways from this last season that we were able to do successfully is to create that fear of missing out. And it was constant. We constantly talked about it is create FOMO and give access. We're not secretive. Here's our access. Here you can have it behind the scenes. Go get with all these student athletes and see what they're doing too. So we're giving them access and then creating FOMO.
Awesome. And then Jim, to finish this up, you.
I think in everything, transparency always wins. And so I know that it's hard or maybe even scary to go to leadership and fight for a lot of what we're talking about right now. But you have to embrace the fact that you have been put in a place to be a change agent. You're a part of a movement that's only going to grow to be the place where viewership, consumption, engagement, and all the things that lead to ROI happen. And I think you got to be honest with the leadership. And of course, you have to prepare data. You have to tell a story of your own to them on why you want to do certain things to help brand your athletes, to create certain types of content, to ultimately create FOMO, to Leah's point, because that is what wins. And so be transparent with your leadership and fight for change and fight to continue to evolve this social media, storytelling platform that is only going to grow. And then be transparent with how you tell the story. My favorite accounts are ones that post when things aren't going as well, when they lost that big game, when they were unfortunately not picked where they wanted to be picked. Don't just post when, even if you're controlling a team account, like get your coach on board to post all the time and tell the whole story, because some of the best parts of a great climax or high point of a story is remembering where you came from and that exposition and that conflict and that rising action that led to the solution of it. And so be transparent internally with your leadership and be transparent externally with how you tell the story.
Awesome. Well, again, obviously appreciate it. Time flies when you're having fun, as they say. I know everyone kind of crazy times across the board, and Leah middle of a head coaching search, and Jim obviously the beginning of the year, but really do appreciate your guys' time. For everyone who tuned in, thank you as well. Also, as soon as the webinar is over, within an hour or so, you should get a review of the webinar. So if you need to send it to your boss or whatever it is, or if you want to rewatch it, some takeaways, whatever it is like that, you guys will get an email with a replay of the webinar in your inbox within the next hour. Again, really appreciate everyone for coming on, for joining us, for the questions. It's really, really great to have you all, and looking forward to the rest of the year, and hopefully everyone has a good 2020. So thanks again, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.